We are the higher self of the one, known to this instrument in your language terms as Kevin, whose incarnation cycle began on the timeline as referred to by a people in your current language vibratory sequence terms. This entity finds itself in this timeline, preparing for a higher version of entry into the space-time experience of totality. This entity, whose incarnation began on 1959, wants to understand several aspects about its lessons and the other aspects for the purpose of entry into a higher understanding of its current life's mission. Before we start to address the query which is in the mind complex of this instrument, we would like to warn each entity who is listening to our message to remember to align only with the vibration of heart-centeredness, and only to listen to those thought forms which would provide a greater clarity of the mind, the body, and the spirit. Complex totality. This entity, known as Kevin Virgil Brown, wants to understand its current life's mission and its soul name and past lives. This entity's current life mission is to learn the lesson of trying to align towards the vibration of fourth density of the heart-centeredness, which will allow it greater clarity and ability to learn the lessons in the pathway of alignment towards higher vibration of the heart-centeredness. Its main mission in this timeline is to learn the lesson, to expand its heart-centeredness, to reach into higher vibration potential of conscious understanding, and to align with its inner nature towards higher pathway of the self. Furthermore, the graduation window, which is now activated, is currently open to allow this entity a greater alignment. The other query, which pertains to its soul name and past lives, of which we are now going to address and share with you. This entity's soul name is closer to Sabara, as known in your language terms, wherein this entity started to learn the lessons of the first density consciousness in the planet known as Alcyon, wherein the first lesson it learned was the lesson of understanding the nature of beingness, which allowed this entity to enter into the vibration of consciousness. Furthermore, this entity, the entity is a first density being in that timeline, leading into the higher understanding of the space-time experiences of this entity's incarnation. This furthermore led this entity to then merge and align with higher and higher vibration potential, giving rise to greater and greater understanding of totality. After this entity learned the lessons of first density consciousness in the form of a elemental, fully understanding the lessons of the red ray, this entity was able to enter into the vibration of the so-called timeline of second density consciousness, wherein it started to learn the lessons in the form of a second density life form, similar to the entity known as a tree life form, allowing it to align with a higher vibration potential consciousness, giving rise to greater and greater experiences of understanding the nature of reality. After learning the nature of reality, this entity was then able to align with a higher potential of consciousness towards greater and greater experiences in the timeline, which led this entity to then merge into the timeline distortion of the later vibration of second density. After learning to become aware, however, in this timeline, much of the work was done with the unconscious state of only movement and growth, and slowly becoming aware reaching into the later vibration of second density. Furthermore, allowed this entity to learn the lessons in the form of a animal life form, and the progress of this entity was of a great nature, which provided this entity to then progressively transition higher and higher in consciousness, allowing this entity to then merge into the vibratory rhythms of reality. As this entity was able to then enter into the timeline of later second density, it began to learn how to interact with other entities of a similar vibration in order to access the understanding of the later vibration of second density, and to learn the nature of trying to balance between the inner and the outer self, which soon allowed this entity to then enter into the timeline distortion of third density. In the level of third density, this entity was provided with greater experiences of choosing the pathway of polarity, and by interacting with the catalyst, this gave this entity a greater and greater experiences of the mind, body, and spirit complex totality. Furthermore, after learning the lesson, this entity was able to understand a greater alignment towards the necessity of service to others, since it was guided by a fourth density entity in the planet of its origin to choose the pathway of service to others, which led this entity to then reincarnate into the Earth planet in the timeline of around 1645, and was referred to by the soul name of Tibra. In the lands known as Africa, it spent its timeline as a musician, playing the musical instruments, leading and understanding the nature of reality, which allowed it to then further expand its consciousness, and then it merged into the vibration consciousness of this timeline. This entity then, after a certain time, crossed over on the timeline of 1720, which led this entity to then become ready for the next timeline of 1912. In that incarnation, it was known by the name of Emelina, in the lands as referred to by people as the United States. In your current vibration terms, it birthed. We correct this instrument. Its birth started, wherein its main purpose was to learn with the vibration of understanding its true nature, and to learn the communication systems of the orange ray and the yellow ray, which included the aspects of the egoic mind, which must be put in tune and which must be communicated in a way. This followed and allowed this entity to then align with a higher consciousness of a entity, leading into the vibration potential of the experiences, which led this entity to then enter into the timeline of this current incarnation after crossing over in the previous lifetime of 1957. In this timeline, its incarnation has begun on 1959, and now its main opportunity is to learn the lessons of the heart-centeredness, vibration of love and light. Hence we leave you, beloveds, in the love and light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one Creator. Bye.